welcome everyone. We are so grateful that you are here. Without any pomp and circumstance, we're going to go ahead and dive in the interest of time. I know people are still joining, and we welcome all. We're just going to hop right in. I'm sharing screen, and if anything is off, I trust you all will let me know. Fantastic. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to the sixth installment of the Exchange Data Centers 101. Today, we will tackle the important topic of data centers and policy. I am Dr. Natasha D. Jarnett of the Christina Lee Brown Environment Institute at University of Louisville. I lead community engagement in the Institute, and I serve in the research teams of Greenheart Louisville and the U of L Superfund Research Center. I am pleased to acknowledge my colleagues, Drs. Candy Walker and Joy Hart, who lead the Community Engagement Core of Greenheart Louisville, and Drs. Ted Smith and Lauren Heberly, who lead the Community Engagement Core of the Superfund Research Center. So this series is hosted by the Christina Lee Brown Environment Institute, and it is for a program that is called The Exchange that brings together the community engagement initiatives of both Greenheart Louisville and U of L Superfund Research Center. And we also thank Physicians for Social Responsibility for being a sponsor of this series. Before we get started, we will note that the opinions expressed are that of their presenters. They do not necessarily represent the views of University of Louisville or the Christina Lee Brown Environment Institute, nor do the logos therein indicate endorsement. And I think we have been through these goals multiple times. And so I will not belabor the point by stepping through each of these, but we have this fantastic opportunity in the Exchange and Data Centers 101 to build shared knowledge, to have dialogue around this really interesting topic of data centers and exploring potential impacts of them. We also are connecting people to resources. You all have been sharing resources in the chat. Please keep them coming. We'll be sharing a resource library with you soon. We've also received your request for presenter slides, and we will do our best to share those with you where we have permissions to share them. But understand that there are multiple viewpoints when it comes to data centers and potential impacts. We are here to learn. So when you have differences of opinion, when you want to understand something further, please be sure you are tackling the topic and not addressing the person directly. So we have a special Menti poll for you once again. We've got 4 new questions. Hopefully you can see the Menti poll connection here on the screen. You can go to menti.com and then enter the code 71245141. Again, that's 71245141. Or you can scan the QR code that's here on the screen. I am going to stop sharing this screen, and then I'm going to open the Menti poll for you to join there. We can also share that Menti link here in the chat. Thank you so much, Dr. Hart. Now let me open our Menti poll. Okay, we've got the Menti poll open. Once again, that QR code is on the screen, and the Menti code, if you are just typing in menti.com on your phone, on your computer, on your device, that code is 71245141. All right, we've got several of you in. We have a map here on the screen. This map comes from Visual Capitalists, and it shows data centers across the US, including Alaska and Hawaii. So please put a dot on the screen for where you are located. So far, we've got a large number of folks that are joining us in Kentucky, but I see Arizona, Texas, Florida. I'm not sure if that is Vermont or New Hampshire. Maryland is here. California. Oh, wow. Washington State. A few more folks are here from Kentucky. Thank you all so much for joining. And thank you for putting yourselves on the map. All right, Virginia, New York. Fantastic. And if you're not joined on the Menti, you are welcome to share this information in the chat if you are comfortable with it. Doing it on the Menti makes it a bit more anonymous. But on this map, you can also see where more or lower numbers of data centers are located throughout the US. So we thought that would be interesting for conversation as well. The location where this map is located, you can use that short URL link on the screen if you would like to visit there. I see people are still joining. We'll give you just a couple more minutes to show on the map where you are. All right, Michigan is on the map. Nebraska's on the map. A couple more from Kentucky. This is fantastic. Oregon's on the map. Oh, we've got two different parts of Arizona reporting in. Just so grateful that you all are here. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn to our next Menti polling question. All right. Have you attended a community meeting, a local hearing, a town hall, or other public meeting about data centers, not including this particular webinar series? Right. A number of you have so far. Got a long way to go. About half of you have participated thus far. And still, most of you have attended community meetings, local hearings, or town halls, or public meetings on data centers. A number of you haven't. They may not be taking place in your area. And then there are several of you that would, if they were available, but you have not yet. Very interesting. This helps us understand that we have a group that is well versed in the topic of data centers. Thank you so much for participating. I'll head on to the next question, but you're welcome to continue answering. So this is one of those where you select your top three. If a hyperscale data center was located for your area, or was slated for your area, I should say, what three policy aspects of data center development would be most important to you? We're asking this with a policy lens, as policy is a topic of the discussion today. So environmental accountability quickly became one of the top answers. Health impacts assessments, those are some of the things that you think would be most important. So bear with me. All right, environmental regulations are still showing potential for most impact among those that are responding here, followed by data center bans, and then a tie between data center moratoria as well as ratepayer protections. And community benefits agreements is not too far behind. So interesting. Thank you all. Thank you for participating. I will exit this. I'm going to stop share. I'm going to troubleshoot, figure out what's going on with the recording. I want to make sure we have a recording.
I'm back in on my phone, and I think someone started a recording.
I started a recording.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walker. All right, fantastic. Thank you. All right, I will not worry about that. We have a quick video to share with you, about a 5-minute video, and then I'm going to be really excited to introduce you to our speaker for the hour. So I'm setting up my screen to share screen. I will once again apologize in advance if a commercial shows. I think we have set this up that you will not see an ad, but if you do, we will do our very best to change that screen or to skip it as quickly as it allows us to do so. So let me share screen for a quick video. This video is really interesting. It gives us the opportunity to go inside a data center, which probably many of us have not been privy to. I'll just speak for myself. That is not something I have been privy to. We're going to go inside a data center in Alabama. Please let me know if there is no sound coming through or if the sound is low.
Now
to the AI revolution. Big tech companies are spending billions of dollars to build data centers around the country to power AI, but public backlash to these massive facilities is growing, and many Americans don't know how this critical infrastructure actually works. ABC's Elizabeth Schulze got exclusive access to one of Google's data centers in Alabama as the tech giant pulls back the curtain on its operations.
In the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in Alabama, where a former coal plant once roared,
all of these lines came out of that old coal plant.
Now a different kind of hum from a sprawling Google AI data center. How big is this site?
So the property is just over 600 acres.
600 acres.
It's a fairly large property. We've only developed less than a quarter of it so far.
Amid growing pushback against the rapid build-out of data centers nationwide, there's been remarkably fast backlash to building out these data centers.
It has surprised me a bit.
Google is pulling back the curtain. Site manager Thomas Gamble gives us a rare exclusive look at the campus, including its high security server room. Here we go, going in. Security here so tight, it took 6 stages and a full facial scan to get in. We're in. And the room is so loud, we need earplugs.
If you think about when you first turn on a computer and start it up and you hear that noise, that's what you're hearing right now. This is like out of sci-fi.
Inside, we see thousands of advanced computer chips that are stored in trays and racks, processing information 24/7.
So if you're looking at your Gmail or your YouTube videos or you're pulling up maps, all of that is getting processed on these servers right here and sent through these networking cables out to you on your device.
The actual internet is running right here.
It is running right here. We do all of Google's services. We do important services for hospitals and 911 call centers. We're processing all of that information and sending it out to users right here.
These servers running nonstop can overheat. We see pipes filled with cold water to keep the room cool. Does it not work if it's too hot?
Components can fail if they get too hot.
Once we step outside, the noise is hard to hear. Then we follow the massive pipes across the campus to a row of 10 towers where the water is cooled. We're going to go up here?
Yeah.
Giant fans draw air across cooling towers where evaporation helps chill the water before it's pumped through the pipes.
When people see data centers, they see what looks like pollution, emissions. What this
is the same water that comes from the facility that goes to everyone's home in the community. It's treated water. We're just using it as a cooling medium.
Water vapor, not
We're using water.
emissions.
Warm water coming out, cool water back in, recycled at least 7 times. How do you make sure when it's a really hot day you're using only your water and not the neighborhood?
But we have meters, so we've got agreements with them on how much water we can or can't use that dictates what load we have.
This data center has been up and running since 2019. It's an active construction site. And this week, Google announced a $1.5 billion expansion. So this construction right now is to expand the data center even more.
Yes. We're looking to add future buildings on this campus to meet the growing customer demand and the needs of our users.
A move the company says will bring in 1,000 temporary construction jobs. Now, a lot of people say these data centers bring jobs, but only for a short time when they're building, and then not that many people actually work here.
No, there's always an influx of jobs for construction. Anytime you build anything, you're going to have a larger influx for construction. But I will say here at Google, we have a significant amount of jobs to be brought to the community.
In your view, this adds jobs versus takes them away?
This does add jobs. I mean, in this site where we're at, the previous coal facility was on the same property.
Mm-hmm.
And when that closed, that was a lot of jobs that left this community that we've been able to come back and replace all those jobs plus more.
As tech giants race to build the infrastructure to power the AI boom, recent Gallup polling shows 71% of Americans oppose the construction of AI data centers in their areas, citing concerns over strained resources, noise, and higher utility bills. In town halls across the country, our team has witnessed frustration and outrage over the rapid build-out of these data centers to power AI.
People are getting steamrolled.
At least 14 states have now proposed a pause on new data center sites. We see across the country there's so much negativity, concern about these data centers on people's bills, on water. just on it coming into the community?
There's a lot of negative sentiments as we're building. We're trying to figure out the best, most efficient use of all the power, the water, any of the systems we can.
Gamble shows us how this site has built its own power substation,
This puts us on an island separate of the rest.
ensuring Google pays for all of the massive amounts of electricity used here instead of having neighbors foot the bill, a pledge the company has made nationwide.
The best analogy about a data center is we're just a lot of servers that's storing information, just like books are in your library.
People do not think of data centers like public libraries
They
right
don't,
now.
but it's just a very large public library because we're organizing the world's information and making the systems operate.
It takes 90 seconds for this NASA engineered AC cool.
It was my goal for you not to hear an ad, and you just got a little piece of an ad. With that, I am so excited to introduce our speaker for today's webinar. I am going to load up the PowerPoint once again. And then after the sound of my voice, I am happy for you to hear from Dr. Adrienne Hollis. We go ahead just a couple slides. I seem to be stuck. In the interest of time, I just will not get to share her beautiful title slide, but it will be on the cover of the YouTube video that we'll post after this. So Adrienne Hollis, Doctor of Philosophy and Juris Doctor. She is the Vice President of Environmental Justice, Health and Community Resilience and Revitalization for the National Wildlife Federation. In that role, she leads the environmental justice team to advance environmental and climate justice policy and programs while examining the related health concerns posed. The Environmental Justice Program serves as a recognized resource for communities, and Environmental Justice Program serves as a recognized resource for communities and other stakeholders. With more than 20 years of experience in the environmental justice and public health arena as an environmental toxicologist and an attorney, she works at the intersection of environmental justice, health disparities, and climate change. She works to identify priority health concerns related to climate change and other environmental assaults. She evaluates climate and energy policy approaches for their ability to effectively address climate change and benefit underserved communities. She is a member of the Board of Scientific Counselors Climate Change Subcommittee and the Maryland Department of Environment's Air Quality Control Advisory Council. And she is an author of the 5th National Climate Assessment, or NCA 5, the mitigation chapter. And she is a professorial lecturer at the George Washington University's Milken Institute School of Public Health. I am pleased to introduce Dr. Adrienne Hollis. You have the floor, and we can't wait to learn from you today.
Thank you so much, Dr. DeJarnett. Let me share my screen. All right. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Let me just fix my screen here. All right. It looks like I'm having technical difficulties now.
Uh-oh.
Okay, there it is.
Oh, good. I'm glad it's not contagious. It's perfect on our end. We can see your slide
Okay.
perfectly.
Thank you. And thank you for the invitation. And thank you to the University of Louisville Christina Lee Brown Environment Institute for both hosting this important and wonderful series. I've looked at all of the past events, and I encourage you, if you haven't seen them, they are very informative. So please go and view them. And also this invitation to speak with you. So today we're going to be exploring the invisible legal and political battles that are shaping daily lives as we analyze how local policy is the last line of defense in the explosive age of artificial intelligence. I should say that and get a drum beat. But before we dive into the data, we have to understand what our tools are. So I have a slide here on the difference between legislation and policy, mainly because I needed to remind myself, because as a lawyer, I wanted to talk about legislation more so, and you will see some legislation in the presentation, so forgive me for that. Legislation is rigid, and rigid laws may take months or years to pass. Flexible policy is how governments and tech companies negotiate on the fly. Now, that flexibility can either protect us or blindside us. And that flexibility often means a lack of public protection. So we need to know who's in charge, who regulates data centers. We know that there's a regulatory gap. Historically, the federal government handled the big interstate power lines, while states and towns had the role of deciding what got built in our backyards. And this is a hands-off system that worked perfectly for decades until the unprecedented resource demands of AI data centers. That started a whirlwind of trouble. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So the historical energy assumptions that existed that led FERC, for example, the federal government FERC, which is quasi-government, to run, is one of them is that our electrical grids, I guess FERC would be in control if our electrical grids would have power demands that would grow slowly and predictably over time. That is not the case, however. Hyperscale data centers have completely destroyed that predictability, forcing tech corporations to directly interfere with local energy planning. So now there is seemingly a simple question: who decides the rule for connecting large loads like data centers to the transmission system? Is it the federal government or the states? Right? That's an ongoing discussion. And it's important because that's how we talk about who's protecting us. So you might expect a federal watchdog agency like the Environmental Protection Agency or EPA to step in. But earlier in June of this year, the EPA officially declared that it will not set national environmental standards for AI data centers. I think initially I thought that was good news. And then I started to notice some other patterns. Instead, what EPA is doing, and the federal government actually, is fast tracking approvals under what's called a build first, ask later approach. That leaves local towns, local communities to handle the environmental consequences without protections, right? So EPA's decision not to set those standards for AI data centers eliminates a layer of regulatory control, but it doesn't suspend or isn't supposed to suspend any environmental obligations. But with EPA stepping back, the good news is that citizen suits under the Clean Air Act or Clean Water Act or other legislation or state and local policies has increasingly become a tool for environmental advocates and a pain for tech developers and operators. Now, I mentioned that federal policies are prioritizing speed, the need for speed. Washington is actually pushing for speed over caution, using aggressive executive orders, for example, to bypass local red tape for projects that that are over 100 megawatts data centers, right? This is creating a massive policy strain where federal technology ambitions directly clash with local community protections. And I'm going to give you an example. Last year in April, the president issued Executive Order 14262. It's called Strengthening the Reliability and Security of the United States Electric Grid. It directed the Department of Energy, DOE, to streamline, systemize, and expedite its processes for issuing emergency orders when, and I quote, the relevant grid operators forecast a temporary interruption of electricity supply, and that is necessary to prevent a complete grid failure. I know I'm giving you some legislation, but I couldn't resist. So one thing you should remember is the Federal Power Act, because that's important. One particular section, Section 202C, grants the Secretary of Energy certain authority over the temporary operation of the electricity system, right, during emergencies. FERC has most responsibility, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, but it doesn't cover emergencies. So now emergency authority is with the Secretary of Energy and that occurred when the Department of Energy, or DOE, was established in 1977. And it allows DOE to require by order connections of facilities and generation, delivery, and interchange or transmission of electricity. This is important. DOE has the right to exercise that authority during war, that makes sense, or, and here's what's important, at any other time DOE, determines that an emergency exists by reason of a sudden increase in the demand for electric energy or a shortage of electric energy or of facilities, read data centers, that generate or transmit electric energy, or a lack of fuel or water for generating facilities or other causes. So it sounds like that was written for data centers, right? The waiver has three limitations, such as they are. The first one is that the emergency orders that may result in conflict with environmental regulations may be issued for up to 90-day periods. That's great, but they can be renewed for an additional 90-day period as long as DOE deems it necessary to meet the emergency. Second, if an emergency order would result in a violation of an environmental law or regulation, DOE must ensure that the order is in effect only during hours necessary to meet the emergency and serve the public interest. Data centers run 24 hours, y'all. So, what does that really doesn't help us very much. And then the final one is that DOE must, to the maximum extent practicable, ensure the order is consistent with environmental laws or regulations. So not much teeth there. Just to give you an idea, that I'm going to be quick, by June of this year, last month, DOE had already issued more than 30 such orders, 21 of which were issued after the facility applied. 6 specifically referred to data centers, 12 directed energy generating facilities, which could be data centers, to operate up to their maximum generation output level. So operate at full speed. Notwithstanding, meaning in spite of, despite air quality or other permit limitations. So do what you need to do, ignore any particular environmental rules, whether it's federal, state, or local law or regulation, or any other source of law. And then there were 2 other orders that directed the same thing, but used different wording. It said, notwithstanding air emissions or other permit limitations. 6 of those original orders are still in effect until September, and some expired in May or June. And there may be some new ones. So the order reflects a broader federal goal to reduce permitting delays for large-scale data center projects that support AI workloads and national infrastructure. Federal agencies like the Department of Commerce, for example, were directed to streamline their reviews. So this is another protection that is under attack, another protection for us as citizens that is under attack. And that's important. What is also important is that the order emphasizes the siting of data center development on previously disturbed land, otherwise polluted property, right? Brownfields or Superfund sites, as well as on federally controlled land. It directs the EPA to identify those sites and develop guidance so that the review period is expedited. In addition, the Department of Interior, of Energy, and Defense were were directed to authorize data center construction on suitable federal lands. And the concern there is that projects on federal land typically requires only federal permits and approvals. So this avoids the need for any additional lengthy state or local review process. And then it also addresses NEPA, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, but I won't go into that. I'm going to leave that now. I've punished you all enough. So when we talk about federal protections, and there are those that sort of balance the scale. So it isn't all bad news at the federal level. Some lawmakers are fighting back with proposals like the No Harm Data Center Act and other policies. And what these are designed to do is to act as financial shields, ensuring that massive corporate energy consumption doesn't cause our monthly electric bill to skyrocket. And that's important. I think we all would agree. Now let's talk for a moment about non-disclosure agreements, or NDAs. Perhaps the most controversial tool in this industry is the Corporate Non-Disclosure Agreement, or NDA. When tech giants force our elected local officials to sign these agreements, what they're doing legally is gagging our government. That keeps the voters, keeps us completely in the dark until the final votes are cast. So that discourages, totally shuts down any participation we might have. Because of the secrecy, you see a groundswell of public involvement and engagement. Public outrage is at an all-time high, and you saw this, you heard this in the past video, data showing that over 70% of residents oppose unmitigated, uncontrolled data center growth. And communities are realizing that these massive facilities not only ruin local peace with noise pollution and could contribute, of course, to air pollution, water pollution, and other types of environmental contamination, it also generates almost zero permanent jobs for local residents. And you heard the man say that it creates temporary jobs. I wish I had been on there to ask him about the jobs that were replaced from when it was a coal plant. And he talked about how most of those jobs and others have been added. Is that temporary? And what are the people doing? I'd like to know. So, how are communities fighting back? You know, this is my most exciting, the most exciting part for me of the presentation, because of the fact that everyday citizens, the communities, are winning by showing up in large numbers to public hearings and forcing their local governments to pass emergency zoning freezes or moratoriums, right? They are successfully shifting the power balance by demanding legally binding benefits instead of trusting empty corporate promises. And I'm just going to tell you quickly, I spoke with one of my longtime community partners, Reverend Leo Woodbury from New Alpha Community Development Corporation in Florence, South Carolina last week. He called me because he had just had a big win with the data center in Florence. The members of his organization spoke with folks in the community who were doing direct action and talked about how great that was, and they needed to do more, because the purpose of direct action is to lift your issues, to get public attention, to include the media, and to force all the parties to the negotiating table with the tech company. And when he met with the tech company, he did so with a number of presiding elders representing 34 churches, Black veterans, and a host of other organizations. The whole purpose of those meetings was to establish a community benefits agreement. And in that agreement, they asked for training for retired teachers, for example, and for teachers, and for community members to provide remedial help and tutoring because Florence happens to have certain parts of Florence happen to have low success rates when it comes to education. So why not ask for what you need, right? And he also wanted to include people work ready programs and assist people in getting jobs for the 21st century, not construction jobs or maintenance jobs, jobs that could help, you know, jobs that could bring them in, you know, into competitive the competitive market for renewable energy, for example. Also for housing and home ownership training and to support business incubators and community-based organizations and a facility to do all of those activities. He also had, and this is also important, the support, the visual support, the verbal and written support of state senators and county government who helped them get into discussions to talk about the community benefits agreement. The facility decided they weren't going to build in Florence, and that just happened a couple of weeks ago, so that's a big win. And they also said that they're going to honor their agreement with the county and give them $24 million. When Reverend Woodbury and his team went to the meetings, they took 2 busloads of people, over 100 passengers, went to those meetings. They went to the state capitol, and he also said, well, now because he talks a lot at the state has produced 5 pieces of legislation. I think they're all pending. They're under discussion, and it's to limit building data centers on brownfields, which I talked about briefly. It puts a moratorium on data centers until 2028. And in one bill, the tech company has to go through an application process. And it also includes the fact that there should be no more non-disclosure agreements because that is a total lack of transparency. So that was a big win. And then I'm going to talk about this later, the digital gateway in Prince William County. But I do want to speak on this one point is that the communities group, the HOAs and others invalidated through the courts the rezoning approval because rezoning is a big issue, right? If you want to rezone an area to industrial so that they can bring in data centers, that's important, and you should have a voice in that. Well, here, the representatives for big tech committed a number of violations that the court pointed out, including they advertised late. The meeting was, the notice came on December 9th in 2023, and that was only 3 days before the December 12th hearing. And it fell well short of the statutory minimum notice period. And also the law requires notice to be published twice with specific timing, and though that was not met. There was also a failure to make application materials publicly available. You've got to have a repository for anything that is going to affect the community. That's regardless of whether it's related to this data center or not. The county didn't provide rezoning documents for public review that it had, when it issued the first notice so that people would be prepared to talk about the concerns at the public meeting. So another violation of statutory requirements that deprive the residents, the community, the citizens of meaningful participation in this process. And then the tech company decided to proceed with the meeting and other things despite receiving legal warnings about it, right? They were advised to re-advertise, sort of start over. And they said, well, we'll just assume the risk of litigation, thinking that there wouldn't be any. And then the board had a 27-hour meeting that concluded with a 4-3 approval. But what this did was, with all those errors I talked about, it allowed the Oak Valley Homeowners Association and individual residents to challenge the rezoning successfully. And I think that's amazing. This case is a reminder that in a fast-paced, high-stakes development environment, which is where we are now, these administrative oversights can be very consequential. to tech companies, and we need to keep that in mind. I'm almost finished, and then we can ask questions. So real world wins isn't just a theory, right? We know that it works. There are so many incidents, so many, I guess, examples of wins that is out there in the digital world, right? That it's amazing. And every time I hear one, I get so excited. Grassroots resistance has already killed or delayed over 75 massive projects nationwide, including the digital gateway fight that I mentioned earlier. And that has proved or is proving that organized communities can stop a tech rollout. In this case, it was a $130 billion tech rollout. So a little bit about it, because it's so famous and so important. The Prince William Digital Gateway was a proposed 2,100-acre tech corridor in rural Gainesville, Virginia. We know Virginia has the highest number of data centers at the moment. This would have been the largest data center complex in the world. The plan was to build up to 37 massive data centers, and it would have spanned 22 million square feet, which is as large as 61 pentagons. And it was projected to yield up to 500 million in annual local tax revenue. And that's a little bit about Virginia and their regular tax incentives for data center build outs. We won't talk too much about that. What's important to note is the location chosen for the site. It bordered the Manassas National Battlefield Park. So that invited historic preservation groups and nearby residents who strongly opposed it to get involved. Now, let me go back. I talked about the size. I also want to give you an idea compared to the size of Reagan National Airport and LaGuardia Airport combined. The facility would have also had about 2,000 massive diesel generators with the capacity to fuel Pittsburgh's electrical needs. Imagine the amount of potential air pollution that is. So the homeowners not only argued that public hearing notices were not properly advertised, but they fought against the placement of the data center based on its location. There are other sites that I could talk about. I kind of list them here. Virginia, local opposition is emerging early in Project Hercules, which is about a $3 billion project, highlighting how pushback is moving into the pre-permitting phase. So they're already involved early. In South Dakota, there's activity there from the state legislature. In Pennsylvania, the Project Scott data center campus was denied in a 5-0 vote with organized resident opposition. In Florida, where I live, but I don't live in Palm Beach, there's a project called Project Tango. And the mayor of that town urged lawmakers to back new restrictions on large data centers near homes and schools because that was a big issue. Remember, location also matters. So these are just some of the ideas, some of the examples of what people are doing. There are also local policy tools. So at the local municipal level, the best shields are zoning overlays, issues around zoning, and temporary permitting bans, because we've already talked about zoning freezes and moratoriums in that regard. By putting hard geographic boundaries in place right now, towns and communities can legally keep heavy industrial infrastructure completely away from residential neighborhoods. And this is why I was saying that zoning is so important. The good news, more good news, states are also stepping up, stepping into that vacuum that was created by the federal kind of step back. They've been enacting statewide construction freezes and strict water mandates. These laws legally force tech developers to prove that they won't dry out local drinking water aquifers before they even break ground. And there's another great example of pushback, because we know that Virginia has generous incentives for data center build out. One is the data center retail sales and use tax exemption, I think, and that'll be in place until 2035. And what it does is exempt qualifying equipment from state sales tax. And almost the participation is astronomical. And it cost Virginia about 750 million in lost sales tax revenue in 2023. But the size of the subsidy has drawn concern and legislative scrutiny. And that's important because senators have backed a repeal effort worth roughly 1.6 billion annually, because they're not having it. They're not happy about this. And then there have been activities in Pennsylvania and other places. And in addition to all of that good news, some of our strongest defenses don't even mention the word data center. So when we pass broad policies like commercial water caps or heavy power use tariffs, we can protect local resources and make tech companies pay their fair share without fighting a single zoning war, even though I did emphasize the need to be aware of zoning in and around schools and homes and the like. So to conclude, data center cancellations due to community pushback have exploded into a nationwide trend. In the first quarter of this year alone, local opposition blocked or delayed at least 75 projects, as I mentioned earlier. And it's a structural shift. It's not a cycle or a outlier, a spike. Communities have internalized what is being defined as an opposition playbook. Legislative sessions have introduced formal regulatory uncertainty, and the number of active opposition groups has more than doubled across 49 states. And I think that that's important and impactful. The fact that moratoria are being used more frequently than before. More than 300 state data center bills were filed in the first 6 weeks of 2026, with statewide moratorium proposals introduced in 14 states coming from both sides of the aisle. I think that that is very important. And Maine came within one House vote of becoming the first state in our history to impose a statewide data center ban. But what's important is grassroots opposition. That's what's important to me because I partner with communities. And I know that grassroots opposition has and will continue to achieve effective national ramifications. The number of active opposition groups has not only doubled, but it continues to grow. The number of petition signatures collected in this quarter alone almost matches completely all of 2025. And as our data center pushback, the work of the communities and the residents becomes more mainstream, the opposition has started to extend beyond just the grassroots groups and communities hosting new developments. We're drawing in statewide organizations, advocacy groups, and national voices that are focused on energy, water, land use, and ratepayer impacts. So communities are increasingly using a mix of protests, zoning challenges, and other potential ousters, political ousters, to stop these facilities. The expansion, as I wrote here, the rapid expansion of AI technology seems to be is inevitable, but the exhaustion of our local resources and democratic transparency is not. All we have to do is stand together because there's strength in numbers. Thank you for your time, and I welcome any questions that you may have. And
Thank
I
you
will stop
so
sharing.
much. Thank you so much, Dr. Hollis. There are already some emojis coming through in celebration
Thank
of
you.
your expertise and your time and sharing with us today. So please all join us in thanking Dr. Hollis for her time thus far. We have a few minutes for Q&A and probably more questions than minutes, but I'm going to try to squeeze in a couple questions in a bit of a lightning round of Q&A. But thank you for helping us to understand the federal landscape, helping us to understand local policy, some of the levers that exist, for sharing some successes in communities. Really interesting to hear about Florence, South Carolina, as well as Prince William County, Virginia. And there are links for more information on both of these areas in the chat. Hopefully you are following the chat. Let me dive into some questions really quickly. So one of the questions that you received is about property values. Is that a potential lever? Are people exploring the impacts on policy levers? Are you aware of any of this?
So I am not an expert in real estate for real, but I think that I would expect that that is a big concern because if you think about it, you expect property values to drop in areas that are near data centers, just as they do around hazardous waste sites and dump sites and things like that. But that's just me. I'm not, that's my opinion.
All right, potential encouragement for people that have opportunity to explore in that area.
Absolutely.
And so we also have a question. And so thank you, Angeli, for that question. David offered a question. Could you speak about any effective strategies you've seen local organized groups use to bring power to the table and when?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry. Is that
Absolutely. Um, David asks, could you speak about any effective strategies you have seen local organized groups use to bring power to the table and do that successfully?
Absolutely. And in addition to the one that I mentioned for Florence, um, the number one thing is to reach out to everybody. Education is key, right? Let people know what the threat is. What is it? How does it affect me? What can I do about it? Get people involved in that regard. Once people can see themselves in an issue, then they're going to want to, they're going to want to be involved. So it's outreach and engagement. And after that, I would look at who is on my team, so to speak. So I have legal representation, and the Southern Environmental Law Center is a good source. I hope nobody's here because I don't want to send business their way with that. But they've been doing some excellent work with the NAACP and the groups in Memphis, Tennessee. It's looking at who's with you, who's there to support you, and get your local, state, and local officials, the people you elect, to work with you to understand what it is you want and go for that community benefits agreement because it's enforceable.
All right. Thank you. Very helpful advice and insight. We also have a question here from Donovan. Donovan is one of the speakers for our in-person panel. That'll be the culminating event of this webinar series. Donovan asks, regarding data center developments that are approved for development, like the Campground Road hyperscale data center here in Louisville, Kentucky, what advocacy or actions can be taken to further protect the community and local environment, such as community benefits agreements? So the
Yeah.
question is, when there's a data center that is already being developed, what protections can there be for the public?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And I think that a perfect example is what's happening in Memphis, right? When I went there, I did a toxic tour with Sowing Justice, one of the groups there. The Colossus wasn't built yet. It was in process, but people had missed the window, a lot of window for involvement for a lot of reasons. And maybe one was an NDA, I'm not sure. But the thing is that there's so much left to be done because you can check zoning, check to make sure that they're within the regulations, check to see if there's a public repository, look at legal ramifications, and also protests. Protests are good. That worked in Savannah, that worked in, and I didn't get to read about it. I got an email yesterday from someone who worked on the Prince William Digital Gateway because they're so excited that, showing up publicly, and getting the media involved is so important. Much like the reporter today, it would have been great to have community members present. I don't think, but there's so much security and secrecy, but it's never too late, because at this point, what I would be trying to do is make sure that the community is included, because it's not too late. And going forward, we need to know what you're doing at this facility, what are you going to be releasing, all of the questions. So that's what, it's not too late to get involved.
Absolutely. I will try to squeeze in 1 to 2 more questions. We've got a multi-part question here from Anna. Are there resources available on a national level, state level, that local communities can access, especially underrepresented communities that often seem to be targeted for data centers? It's encouraging that local efforts can work, but obviously there are communities that do not have the same resources. Any insights that you can offer there on some resources?
That is a good question, and I don't have an answer. Well, my answer is we have not been successful in identifying funds specifically earmarked for data centers. However, in our newsletter, we do put out funding opportunities, opportunities to apply for funding. And some of that is broad enough that you can have a specific project in mind and write about that, because that's what we're doing. And, don't forget we have an added challenge of using the terminology environmental justice or disenfranchised communities or underrepresented. So we have to be careful in how we word things, but you can take an application and make it fit to your project if it's done correctly, I believe. Then only thing you worry about after that is to get it funded. So
Dr. Hollis, we could talk to you forever. We could continue picking your brain, and I so wish we could. We so appreciate the expertise, the insight that you have already poured into us. We are so grateful for your time. I think your last tip there was please sign up for National Wildlife Federation's newsletter so that you can stay up to date about potential opportunities. And I'll let you clarify if
yeah,
that's the
for
right
the
newsletter.
Environmental Justice Program's newsletter.
Perfect.
At
Perfect. So
environmentaljustice.org. Yeah. So
fantastic. And if you have the ability to drop that into the chat, we'd be so appreciative. For the online audience that watches this after the fact, that's the National Wildlife Federation's Environmental Justice newsletter. And can you repeat that website, please?
I have to get the website. So
No
I'm going to have
problem.
to send that to you. I have
No problem. I'm
look,
happy to
okay.
follow up with people after the webinar. We have a thank you email that we'll send out as soon as possible after the recording is uploaded, and we'll be happy to share that. And if you are able to share your slides with us, we're happy to share those as well.
Yeah, I have one thing. There are
Yeah,
so many
please.
groups out there that have tools that are open,
Yeah.
like the Data Center Advocacy Hub and other groups, things
Yes.
that you don't have to you don't have to reinvent a community benefits agreement. Find out about all of those resources, and I'll provide you with a list, Dr. DeJarnett, of some of the ones that I'm familiar with already. So.
We are so appreciative. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You are the gift that keeps on giving. Please continue to shower Dr. Hollis with emojis and kind words in the chat. I am going to close out with our final few slides, give you just a couple announcements. Now, here is the beautiful title slide for Dr. Hollis that I'm able to get up a little bit after the fact, but still want to show her our appreciation. So we would love to hear your feedback. Thank you to all who continuously provide feedback on the series. Your feedback has helped to expand this webinar series. So please, we would greatly appreciate any feedback that you have to offer. We do try to take and listen and learn from what you have shared. Thank you to Dr. Adrienne Hollis for sharing your expertise with us today. Thank you to all in the audience for your participation. Thank you to the Christina Lee Brown and Byron Institute for hosting this, along with Greenheart Louisville and the University of Louisville Superfund Research Center. And thank you also to PSR for supporting Please stay tuned. This is not the final webinar of the series. We've advertised that today was the finale, but we have expanded. And we're really excited to announce that we'll be offering a bonus session next week. So please come back next Wednesday at noon Eastern to hear from Kareem Marshall of Consumer Federation of America, who will be sharing about data centers and energy costs. We would love to see you then. Also, for our culminating event, that will be the Data Centers 101 film screening and panel. If you are in the Louisville, Kentucky area or plan to be in the Louisville, Kentucky area that day, please scan the QR code that is shown here on your screen. And if you would like to join remotely, if you are very far from Louisville, Kentucky, you are still able to join remotely. The same webinar link that you have been attending using, it has been updated. And so you should automatically be able to join on Thursday, July 23rd at 6 p.m., where we'll have a film screening and a really exciting panel discussion from Byron Gary of Kentucky Resources Council, Elisa Owen of Sierra Club, Donovan Taylor, who I mentioned earlier, from Community Hero right here in Louisville, and one of our organizers of this series, Dr. Ted Smith from the Christina Lee Brown Envirome Institute. He will be moderating the conversation. We would love to see you, whether in person or online then. Please stay engaged by visiting centers.louisville.edu/envirome. You can also stay connected to upcoming events by visiting our events webpage there at the Envirome Institute's webpage. And you can follow us on almost all of the socials. We're at U of L Envirome on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, and Blue Sky. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you, and we are excited to see you next week. At least one more time for the webinar series, and then for the live stream of the in-person panel and screening. Thank you all so much.